Oh, hello everyone. Welcome to another Peaceful Solution Character Education Certification course. You can all be seated, those of you that are standing, and everyone that is coming in, please feel free to grab a seat wherever. Once again, before we get started, I would like to remind everyone, if you have not gotten your acceptance unit of the Peaceful Solution Character Education program, please go on to the page there that you're watching on Facebook, the official Peaceful Solution, and you'll see where you can download the acceptance unit. It's right below the character unit, and of course it is a teacher's manual, and that's what you'll want to download. So as we go through these classes, you'll be able to put your notes not only just where the students will be going through things, but in the notes of the teacher, the lesson plans, and of course they're readily laid out for you as a teacher to be able to put these things together. So please feel free to do so, and also if you have any questions, please feel free you can email them to info@peacefulsolution.org, or you can just send them through Facebook, and we'll be more than glad to answer your questions. Now we're going to pick up where Katan left off last week, so if everybody will be turning back over to Lesson Plan 1, because we're almost to the end of this, and we're going to do a review tonight of Chapter 1 of the Acceptance Unit, and he was in Procedure 6, and he finished all the way up until we get to the scenarios, but we're going to reread the procedure once again. And Procedure 6 said to tell students that just as they must be willing to accept what makes them unique, they must also be willing to accept the uniqueness of others. Ask students how they would feel if someone were to tease or taunt them because of their facial features, size, or even the way they dress. Now, the answers might vary, but should include upset, hurt, embarrassed, and humiliated. So that gives us an idea of what they might say. It says, discuss the words empathy and consideration in the section entitled Accepting Others, found on page 13 in their handbooks. And that's what Katan finished up and completed last week. And it says, explain that accepting others for who they are means accepting them regardless of their physical characteristics or circumstances. Have students turn to page 14 and 15 of their handbooks and read the scenarios and answer the following questions. So we're going to briefly look at those questions and kind of go over them to tie together what Katan had covered in that section, Accepting Others. And we're going to go through that again, because once we get through the scenario, we're going to recover Chapter 1 with what I've learned. And that's pretty much what we want to get done tonight, setting our minds for Chapter 2, which is Accepting Diversity. So here on page 14, if you notice on page 14, if you have a teacher's manual, you're going to notice you have some answers circled. Those are the things that are readily available to you as a teacher that's not going to be there for a student. But that gives the teacher more kind of ideal of what the Peaceful Solution is bringing forth and the answers that the Peaceful Solution is looking for to build this moral character. And always remember that in teaching this program, always look as it's a building tool. You're always consistently putting one layer on top of another layer on top of another layer, and it's a tool that has to be used correctly. So here was scenario 1 on page 14. It says a new student came to school who was twice the size of everyone in the class. Yet he was the same age as everyone else. What should you do to show an attitude of acceptance? Now, of course, you have some multiple choice answers here, and A would be to ignore him. B would be to point at him and begin laughing. C would be treat him like everybody else. Or D, call him names. Now, everyone could easily say, well, obviously it's answer C, treat him like everybody else. But I want you to think back, if you're not in school, most teachers have already gotten through the school years. We have some student teachers, but a lot of teachers that are teaching in school or community leaders that are taking our courses, of course, they've been through school and now they're assisting with other youth. Think back into your school-age years, and if you're a student, think into what you're going through at this time. And I know school's very different right now with the COVID and not being in the classrooms and just not getting back in the classrooms, and then looking to a school year that's going to start next month where everybody goes back into the classroom. So things are different, but try to consider, we see right here that it says that, the right thing to do is to treat him like everybody else. But think to yourself, how often does that truly take place? How often does it take place where someone doesn't, wow, look at him. And I can tell you, I experienced something. We were on a Peaceful Solution meeting in Austin, Texas one time. We were meeting with state senators and congressmen and women, and we were invited to the state capitol by a representative who was acknowledging the peaceful solution for the work they were doing down in the Rio Grande Valley. And one of the office members of one of the representatives we were talking to was very tall, extremely tall. And when he walked through the door, he had to duck his head to get under the door frame to keep on going. And I'm just standing and I'm kind of looking up, and I'm 6 foot, and I had to look up at him pretty far. And I looked and I said, "How tall?" And he immediately looked back and went 6'9", and he walked off. I thought, oh. So I went back up to him and said, "Hey, I'd like to apologize. I didn't mean to offend you." He goes, "No." He goes, "After you've answered that question a million times, you already know what people are going to ask." He goes, "I'm not offended. I just have to answer it all the time." And I thought, I shouldn't have made it so obvious that I was kind of astounded. You don't always see somebody 6'9", at least not where I'm from. But, that's something that the way he kind of talked about it, you could tell that either he had been picked on or it had been a very negative part of his life. He didn't have positive experiences with it. But he's a great guy, big guy, really tall guy, really big guy too. He wasn't a small frame guy, but he was really nice. Once we started talking, he was a very nice guy, as long as the topic wasn't about his height. And I thought that was very interesting. You never know what somebody's went through. What amazes one person doesn't mean that they haven't been picked on for most of their life. So once again, the answer is treat him like everybody else, but how often does that truly take place? And then number 2 here, it says, your cousin's friend is from Puerto Rico and has a strong accent. For him to be accepted, he should, A, lose the accent and speak like an American. You hear that a lot. B, stop talking altogether and learn sign language. C, just continue to be himself and stop worrying about what others might say or do. Or D, none of the above. Now, we can very easily say, just continue to be himself and stop worrying about what others might say or do. You talk about somebody from Puerto Rico, and you can go from the northern parts of the United States to the southern parts of the United States, and you can have a huge difference in accent. If you've ever met someone that's from Georgia or Alabama, you can tell very quickly what part of the United States they're from. If you meet someone from New York or somewhere up in the Maine area, it's kind of obvious where they're from. I'm from North Carolina. Language, the way the words are pronounced and things that are said and the way words are put together are very different as compared to even the central part of the United States or the western part of the United States. So you don't even have to look to foreign countries. We're very diverse here in the United States, but we have a lot of English is spoken many different ways in many different states. And we can be countries within ourselves. We can be 50 states or we can be 50 different countries, even here in the United States. And keep in mind that Puerto Rico, for the large part, is pretty much a common part, not a state of the United States, but it's right in with the United States. But of course, you'll hear people saying, watch the news and watch what's taking place with the United States and its borders. And watch what people are saying that if you're going to come here, you need to be speaking English. And watch how people say this with hatred. And I can tell you, just to get in your mind, because we're only going to cover another scenario or two, but I want you to think about this as we go through. If you've never had, and it's not a normal thing that you would have this, but if you've ever sat at customs or a border crossing for any length of time, I've had the benefit, not by choice, to sit at one for about 8 or 9 hours before, recently. And one thing that I got to see a lot of was they were bringing a lot of people in from the United States, and they were very dirty. You could tell they haven't bathed in a while. And they were taking them into a room, and you could see everything that was taking place in the room. They fingerprinted them, they took their picture, and then they sent them out the door. But I could understand in the language they were speaking, they had brought them back from going over the border. They had got an inner tube, or they had, one way or another, they had gotten to the United States, they got caught, and they were bringing them back. And you could see that they were really depressed that they were now back in Mexico. But I asked one in his language, "What are you going to do?" And he goes, "I'm going to go down, I'm going to go back right now." Okay, I hope the best for you. But when you think about acceptance, And when we live here in the United States, we tend to think everybody has the luxuries that we have. And people might say, well, I don't really have luxuries. We have luxuries. I can tell you, we have luxuries. Knowing that you're going to be able to accomplish things which, if you're here in the United States, especially if you're around the Peaceful Solution headquarters, no one ever does without. It's not that way everywhere you go. It's really, really not that way everywhere you go. And accepting that us putting this program out and helping the world become a better place will eventually fix things like starvation, people being murdered, taken advantage of, brutalized, beaten, raped, taken advantage of in its entirety. And people would say that, you're just not going to be able to accomplish that. And my question's always why? Why can we not accomplish that? If we all work toward it, it's very possible. But once again, think about these answers, how, a lot of people go, it's just a common sense answer. Common sense is not so common anymore. And you'll see that in society. Like question number 3 here, or scenario number 3, it says, Sally is unable to afford the latest fashion. To be accepted, she should not have to steal, borrow outfits from her friends, stay home. After all, she shouldn't be seen without brand name clothes, or D, all of the above. When you think about Sally and she's unable to afford the latest fashion, and you think of the latest fashion, that could be a benefit. The latest fashions aren't always positive, and we'll get into modesty as we move through the Peaceful Solution. But think of the pressure that's put on someone to fit in, and think about the stealing that takes place just to fit in. And that's something she should not do, but that's something that people will tend to do, and it's not just women, but also men, young boys and girls, will do it to fit in. Number 4 here, it says, Pete has really big ears and so many freckles that his face is covered with them. To be accepted by his classmates, he should wear a paper bag over his head, consider plastic surgery, just be himself, knowing it's what's on the inside that really counts, or D, just quit school altogether. When you think about, just be himself, knowing what's what on the inside that's really counting, but think about plastic surgery and the amount of money that's spent on that. A lot of people have spent enormous amounts of money to do these things because society and this wanting to fit into society and thinking that I just look weird, I look different, I'm not normal. Well, who says a person's not normal? Who says they're weird? Who says that they shouldn't look that way? We'll go back over as we cover through tonight on how we're all unique individuals. We're not supposed to look like someone else. You shouldn't have to go to a doctor and say, I want a nose that looks just like this movie star. You're not that movie star. You're you. And that's who you're supposed to be. You're not supposed to look like, even twins, and even identical twins. Growing up, I had 2 friends that were identical twins. And I mean they were identical. The only way you could tell the difference between them was one had a cut on the top of his lip from birth. It was something that occurred during the birthing procedure, and the other one didn't. Outside of that, after you got to know them, you could tell them apart very easily. But first meeting them was very difficult. But even though they looked so much alike, they were 2 completely different people. The way they liked to do things, the way they talked, their associations, how they conducted themselves were very different. So even though those 2 were looking like each other, they had their own personalities. And here with number 5, and this will be our last one, and we'll continue to do our review so we don't run out of time. It says, Jim is really small for his age. Even though he tries hard, he just can't play basketball. What could Jim do to be accepted by other boys in gym class? A, keep trying his best. B, get extra coaching after school. C, be patient. He's continuing to grow and to develop. Or D, all of the above. And of course, you think that, and the reason I read this because for basketball, when I was a young boy wanting to play basketball, and everybody wanted to dunk the basketball when we were in school. Of course, we were in middle school. And we had a visitor come to one of our schools one time in North Carolina. And the man was 5'3", and we kind of laughed at him when he walked in, but he was a college student. He went to North Carolina State University. And he asked everybody, tell me something you think I can't do. Well, we're all taller than him. And we said, well, dunk a basketball. And then he did. And that young man, old man now, went on to play in the NBA. But we all kind of laughed when he walked in that he's supposed to teach us something about basketball. He's shorter than we are. And he did something none of us could do. And he shut us up very quickly. But, you know, it just goes to show, don't judge someone by their size because they can probably do some other things. Now, of course, he had a basketball career and he made a lot of money. And then I don't know what he does these days. He's not someone that I knew after he left, except seeing him on TV. But it was someone that I prejudged in my mind. There's no way this guy can do anything that I think a basketball player could do. But he could. He could. He's very popular as being the 5'3" basketball player that could dunk a basketball. Now, did that make him a positive person or a negative person? It didn't make him a positive person because he could dunk a basketball. That was the confusion of teenagers in their, back in the 80s and 90s. So with these examples, I think we can get the gist of what we're talking about with the examples. The answers seem to be obvious, but they're not always applied. So going over to page 17 with what I've learned, on page 16 there's a poem. And this poem, if you get our books where we'll send them to your schools, the MP3 file is actually embedded in the book. You can click play, and you can actually play the poem. I know a lot of schools use overhead display boards now in their schools. So if you have that, or if you would like to get our books emailed to you so you can use them on your display boards at your school, all the audio, like for this poem, once again, it's embedded in the file, and you just have to click play, and it will play for you. But it's please accept me for who I am. Now, looking over to page 17 in the what I have learned, we're going to start off here with the very first thing, and there's 5 things that we really need to have firmly set into our mind before we carry on to the second chapter out of what I have, the acceptance unit. But also keeping in mind, everything that we've built up with the character unit is very important that that's also within our minds. So the first point here, it says, although there are some things in my life that are beyond my control, I do have control over my attitude and outlook on life. And if you'll turn all the way back over to page 1, and keep your finger there on page 17, because we're going to be turning back and forth quite a bit. Of course, we started off with this, the note to the student, the A is for acceptance, and we got to the cans and the cannots of life. And notice here, remember, think about choices and control, because we have to be control of our own life. And when we talk about this control, they're not beyond my control. I do have control. Keep in mind that we're building up to the self-control unit. So we have to accept the fact that we're the one in control of our lives. We can't blame someone else for us making the wrong decision. If we make a bad decision, it falls on us, even if it's because we didn't allow ourselves to become educated. We have to educate ourselves, and once we learn, make better decisions. But here on page 1, the cans and cannots of life, it says, here's the bottom line. There will be things in your life that you will not be able to change, and there will be things you can. When you're able to make a distinction between the two and focus on what you can change, you will demonstrate acceptance of who you are as a unique person. So once again, once we have this knowledge, as page 11 showed us, that knowledge is power. Once we have this knowledge, we can make a decision, we can make a distinction. We will be able to make better decisions. Looking over to page 2, it says, others count too. It says, here is something else to consider. Each person is just as important as you are. So once again, it shows that the things that are in our life and the way we're controlling our life and our attitudes and our outlooks on life, well, the outlook that we need to have on life and the attitude that we should have is everyone is just as important as I am. And it's like we said when we were teaching the character unit, one of the most distinctive ways I've ever seen as an example, and the author was the one that gave me this example many years ago, and I've used it before in teaching this class, was talking about the obituaries in the newspaper, where you see all of these names and you don't really know who they are, but so it doesn't really mean anything to you. But there's a lot of names in that paper that really affects the people that knew that person. But to those of us that didn't know the person, it's just kind of a name. No, they passed away. That's too bad. But then when you recognize a name, it's like, oh, wow. And it starts, you can feel the something, emotions or whatever, it kind of turns in you. And it actually pulls you toward that name because you start having memories of what you would have interacted with that person. And it becomes more personal to you. Well, here this acceptance is, and it doesn't mean sit down and mourn over everybody in the obituaries, but it's recognize every life as important. You don't have to know a person for their life to be important. If this one simple thing right here was implemented, by accepting that every life is important, and notice it says this means that as you learn to accept your life as worthwhile, remember that so are the lives of others, and this is called tolerance, and it is an important part of acceptance. If we could learn just that part alone, you could get rid of road rage immediately. If everybody's life was just as important, because people would be more patient, they would be more readily to follow the rules of the roadways. And then think about what's taking place in society, just like in Chicago alone. Chicago seems to always be in the news every summer for shootings. They're not the only city. When you watch the news, you would think it's the only city, but actually St. Louis is the deadliest city in the United States right now, and not Chicago. But when you see what's going on, it's not just Illinois or Missouri. Even though St. Louis and Chicago are not that far apart, there's a lot of trending anger taking place where people are not able to tolerate each other. There's a lack of acceptance towards the individuality or the uniqueness of individuals in our society today. And it's led to the creation of a lot of different groups that they're identifying differences between themselves, but they're not identifying the acceptance of those differences between each and every person. When you create a group that leads to dividing yourself from other people even more, that's not a positive thing. And that's why here in the acceptance unit, we're talking about the tolerance of others, and we're talking about bringing people together, not separating them further apart. Separating people further apart is not going to be beneficial to anyone, and it's definitely not going to bring peace in a society to always offer division, to torch the city, and so forth. But looking over here to page 3, and of course this is where we had the definition of acceptance itself, and this was the chapter 1, the beginning, accepting me, accepting you. And it said acceptance as presented in this unit of the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program. Notice once again it means willingly acknowledge the positive characteristics about yourself and others. And underline that word positive characteristics. It doesn't mean that you accept everything, whether, you got to accept the good with the bad. It's just the way it comes. You won't be saying that if you're sitting at a jailhouse one night, well, how did you get there? Well, I accepted the good with the bad, and I ended up going here. And Catan covered that last class, and we'll recover that in our bullet points tonight. But once again, continuing here in page 3, it says acceptance means understanding that there are aspects in your life that you can and cannot change. There's some things you can change and some things you cannot. In other words, some things you have control over and some things you don't. Well, what are some things you don't have control over? Well, for example, we are all predisposed genetically towards certain physical characteristics. Our skin and hair color are predetermined by our family ancestry. A lot of people dye their hair, they'll bleach their hair to change it, but it's always going to go back to what it was originally. You'll have to continually work at it to change it. Our skin color is our skin color. And as we proceed through this unit, and I don't want to get ahead, we're going to find out that no matter the color of anyone's skin, no matter the nationality of an individual, no matter what language they speak, we're all pretty close, very close. There's not much difference between us. And there's definitely not enough difference for someone to start trying to cause division and distinctions between. And think about this. I see this all the time, and William used this in a huge group of people we were teaching one time in Laredo, Texas, and you could tell it got a lot of people thinking. And he asked, of course, they're largely Hispanic in Laredo, and we had one teacher with us that was an African American, and there's very few African Americans in Laredo, Texas. So we had some diversity there. We had some, what we would call white people, African American. We had Hispanics. And he used the example of how many different races do we have in the room? And of course they started saying, they pointed out the African Americans, most of them never seen one in person because there's so few there. So they pointed him out, and then you have the white, and then you have the Hispanics, and we kind of conversated about that. And he said, now, if I brought a dog in here, who could tell me what breed it is? Would we all call it just a dog? What about a cat or a cow? Will we just call it a cow and a dog and a cat? Then why, when we look at human beings, do we have to start individualizing them? Why is there division between them? It's because we've been taught to do that. We've been taught to identify humans that way. Even though we don't do anything else like that, and you can tell it got the gears turning in their mind. We're like, well, why do we do that? Why do we feel like we need to divide humans by skin color or nationality? There's really no reason for it. We're all humans. We're all human beings, and it's something that we should work towards in respecting and accepting people for who they are, because you can't change where you're from. If you don't want to be born in the United States of America, it's too late. You're already born. You know, if you don't like being in Russia or China or, you know, Mexico, Canada, any country that you can name, you didn't really have control over where you were born. And you can change your citizenship as you get older, but it's not an easy process, but it won't change where you were born. There's nothing that can do that when you think about these things. So some things you have to accept, whether you like them or not, because they're beyond your control. Looking over to page 4 here, it says the positive side of me. And once again, it says also, this is the very top of the page on page 4. It says accepting who you are as an individual with moral potential begins with evaluating how you think about yourself and your abilities. So this is your potential. This is goals that you can reach. These are things that we can excel to. This is how great we can become. And this is something we should all have, our goals to actually help us to get to that full potential. And of course, evaluating how we think, that's something we should do on a weekly basis. And here in the Peaceful Solution, we do work on that as a weekly basis. You know, we go back and we evaluate our goals. That's what we teach. And that's jumping way ahead to the responsibility unit, but we'll get to that eventually, about how we go through weekly. We don't get to the end of the year and make a new resolution at the next year. We evaluate how we're doing. We set a goal and we do what we can to see how we're achieving it and what changes need to be made to accomplish it. But once again here, it says, at your age, you have not yet reached your full moral potential. And once again, you can't determine what age that is, because knowledge comes at many different ages, and we're all still trying to reach our full potential. You can accept the type of person you're growing into and determine some of the things that are important to you. Developing a positive moral character should definitely be the main priority in your life, and that's all of our lives. And once again, those are the things that we're seeking, that are, some are beyond our control and some that we do have control over. So where we were born, we have no control over that. Our skin color, we have no control over that. Eye color, hair color, those are all, you know, those things are genetics or had to do with where our parents were at when we were born. Now, the way we conduct ourselves, the things that we set in front of us to educate ourselves with, and the decisions we make, those are things that we can control. Looking back here to page 17, because these things all tie in hand, tying in together with building one layer upon another. Page 17, the second point here, it says, the way that I perceive and handle the various circumstances in my life can help me to achieve success if I have a positive attitude and practice what I've learned from the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program. And turning back over to page 5, because we're going to have the ups and downs, the curveballs and the pitfalls, and, you know, keep in mind what we talked about in the character unit was setting our mind in advance for things that are going to come up in life and situations that's going to present themselves, and some of them will be positive and some of them will be negative, but how we react to them and what we allow to be part of our lives, that's accepting it. When we see something, whether positive or negative, and we allow it to be part of our lives, that means we accept it, or we can walk away from it. Well, here it says don't let it get you down, because there's always things that's going to be present in our lives that we're going to have to work through. Now, it says at times it appears every time you look in the mirror you see a different person. And of course, this is because we're talking about ages 11, 12, 13, and 14, but this can be, you know, I remember looking in the mirror just 10 years ago, I didn't see gray hair. I look into the mirror now, I have so many I can't count them. I don't know what it'll look like in 10 more years. They'll probably all be gray or white. I don't know. but I do know that I still see myself changing. I don't have to be 13 or 11 or 12. I still see myself continually changing from day to day, month to month. As life goes, we all change. So this is not really limited to the teenagers that we're talking about. It's everyone. Your facial features are beginning to change as well as your body. Adolescence is a time of rapid physical, mental, and emotional change. Now, this is, of course, the rapid part of it. That's where you're in your adolescence to where you're a child, now you want to be an adult. You just went from being in a classroom for 8 hours a day to now when the bell rings, you get to get up and go to another class. You're not locked in a classroom all day long. You actually get to go from class to class to class to class. And this is all part of growing up. I remember when I got into middle school, and the bell rang, and we got to go down the hallway and into another class, and the bell rang again. We got to get up and go. And we thought we were growing up. Wow, this is neat. We're used to sitting in a classroom to where you couldn't go anywhere. So, I mean, those are things as teenagers I remember back to, and that was a huge deal to us. Now, not so much of a, doesn't even cause my mind to have a second thought, but when I go into schools, I think about that when I see the students, because the hallways go from complete calm, peace, to chaos just at the ring of a bell. And I tell you, we've been to some schools like one in Arkansas. When the bell rings, you just pin yourself against the wall. You just let everybody go down because it is full. It is very full. There's no room to turn around when that bell rings. And, you just see people, it's part of growing up. That's part of the decision making, because you get to high school, you get to choose the classes you want. They don't assign them to you. If you want to take algebra or algebra 1 or general math, or if you want to take biology that year or foreign language, you get to choose all those things. So you feel like you're a grown up, but yet you're still a child, a youth that is growing up. Well, notice it says here that during adolescence, you might experience many insecurities concerning the physical appearances. There can be many insecurities, and it could be easy to forget the special and unique person you are. And that's something that's important, that we not only remember ourselves, but we also put those things back into the mind of the children. Because notice here, the next thing, it says, believe it or not, feeling insecure at times is common and is a normal part of growing up. And this change is not, it's easy to say, it's easy to talk about, but if you're going to be a peaceful solution teacher, you really need to study and look into what takes place with suicides. Because you're going to find that these very simplistic things that you would think, nobody should let their nose bother them. Nobody should let the way their hair looks bother them. If their face is a little off, no one should let that bother them. These little things can turn into, they're not that big of a deal, but they start a reaction chain to where a person can go into a school, and because something's a little different, they get picked on. That leads to something else. That leads to a little gossip, a little slander. That leads to more people picking on them. And it leads to where you'll have people that will literally go home and they'll take their own lives, because through the bullying, through the lack of acceptance, over something that was perfectly normal, should have been perfectly acceptable. It wasn't a negative thing for someone's nose or for their hair to be a certain way, or for that person to experience acne. Everyone does at a certain age. But some minds are so, I won't say feeble, because I don't want it to sound like it's a weakness, but some people are really over concerned about things because no one's ever been able to show them, or they've never understood through someone taking the time to share with them that these things are okay. But when your closest friends are the one putting you down and speaking down about you, those are the times it's hardest for a youth to process. And a lot of people think that it's not that big a deal. Please, if you're going to be a teacher of the Peaceful Solution, look up the rate of suicide among teenagers and why they do it. You'll find out it's a huge deal. It's a very big deal. And if you've processed that, look up the suicide rate of third world countries. There's people committing suicide in third world countries that are 6, 7, 8 years old because they've decided mom and dad says life in that country is horrible. They don't want to have it. And I've literally seen that where 7-year-olds have hung themselves because their country, they've been told is horrible and they're not allowed to come across that border. And I can tell you, if you get into the articles, you'll find out it's not a rare thing, it's a weekly thing. To where in 2 city blocks, you can have 3 suicides in 1 week of youth that are 10 or under because the burden of where they live, they just don't like it because they've been told it's better on the other side. They've never seen the other side. They just tell me it's better. And there's a lot of that. You know, the grass is always greener on the other side. And then when you get to the other side, the grass should technically be greener where you came from, right? Well, think about this as these teenagers go through these things and the physical... look down to the next paragraph because this is really where it gets into the parts that we're talking about. And it starts out with the problem for many teens, however, is when they become so focused on their outward appearance, they neglect to build their moral character. That's the re-strengthening of the mind towards what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, what's positive and what's negative. Many young people between the ages of 11 to 15 suffer from what is commonly called an identity crisis. You know, people are just trying to fit in. They're just trying to find out where they fit into life and how they fit into life. And a lot of people, you go to school and I just want to be popular. Well, why? I asked somebody that one time, why do you want to be popular? Was you popular in school? No. I wanted to be left alone. I didn't want it to be popular. I just wanted to be left alone. I just wanted to go to school and leave. That's all I wanted. It never was something, but I know some people, they have that feeling they want to be the center of the crowd, the center of attention kind of aspect. Well, there's a lot of people that get that, but when you're the center of attention, a lot of other things come with that also, and we'll get to that as we proceed through the acceptance unit. But turn over to page 9, because this is the part that a lot of people kind of let slip when they're young. They let slip in their minds, in their thinking, and they start looking at things in a negative way when they think life is over, I'll never improve, I'll always just be this way. You've only started a very small portion of your life. The author of The Peaceful Solution said something to me one time, and I've never forgotten it. And, he said, when you go into a middle school, and he said, how old are those students again? It's 11, 12, 13, about that. You mean they've only been out of diapers for like 8 or 9, 10 years? Pretty much. He goes, remember that when you're teaching. They literally were just in diapers 8 years ago, 9 years ago. And he didn't say that to demoralize. He was saying, don't expect them to have knowledge of a 30 or 40 or 50-year-old. Expect them to be learning. Expect them to be growing. And don't ever think that there's something you're going to tell them that, they already know this. They most likely don't. And that's something with the Peaceful Solution that we've realized. Don't always skip over something that's not important. They know that. Not necessarily. It could have not been mentioned in their hearing. Well, one thing is letting them know, hey, you still got a whole life ahead of you. You still got a lot of growing to do. And here on page 9 it says, hey, you're not finished growing yet. And it starts out by saying accepting yourself, and once again, we need to accept ourselves, and we'll get into seeing how that is respect, self-respect. That's part of accepting ourselves. Accepting yourself means accepting the age you are and the limitations that go with it. Because you're not an adult yet, you're limited in the choices you're allowed to make for your own safety as well as your physical and intellectual growth. Some people, 15, might want to have a nose job, or they might want to have plastic surgery. Their parents are telling them, don't do that. Things are going to change. If you don't like it, you're not done growing. You've got a whole life ahead of you. A lot of things are going to be different in just the next year. But notice here it says, for your own safety, once again, as well as your physical and intellectual growth, your parents, teachers, and other authority figures instruct, guide, and monitor how you're influenced, the decisions you make, and how you conduct yourself. And this is very important for those people that are setting in the position of adults or authority figures. It's very important. Notice it said guide and monitor how you're influenced. There's a lot of parents that have this attitude, no, my child, it's old enough. He can choose what he wants to do. Well, he can, but you have to educate them to what is right and what is wrong. You have to give them the know-how, what is positive and what is negative. After you've educated them with the right tools to make a proper decision, then they can take on more of the responsibility of accepting or not accepting things into their life. But to say that, no, my child's 12, he's got enough sense to know what to do. Well, he might be a very bright young man or a bright young woman, but there's a whole life out there that they know nothing of. And sending them, a lot of those things come with sending them into the room to play video games or so forth. It's not a positive thing. So a lot of this lack of acceptance we find can start with the adults themselves. But once again, notice here in the second paragraph, it says a humble, thankful attitude leaves no cause for conflict. A humble, thankful attitude leaves no cause for conflict. Without a humble attitude, being instructed on what you should and should not do can seem frustrating. And that's one thing that we have to understand, that we were teenagers at one time too, and when someone gave us instructions, wasn't readily accepted always, at least for myself. Many teens have a difficult time maintaining positive relationships with those in authority because they have opposing views of what is fair. Here's the bottom line. Even though you might not like a decision your parents or other authority figures have made for your benefit that you think is unfair, you must still be respectful and obey. If you've ever instructed a younger sibling to do something for his or her benefit and he or she refused, then you know how parents or other authority figures feel when they are disobeyed. And that's where consequences come in. But once again, we're talking about perception. And sometimes people like to think that, well, they won't let me do anything. They just hate me. Well, no, many times it's a parent's telling or an authority figure's telling a child, don't do that. And you don't want to say, trust me, I know, I've done it before. You just want them to kind of get the understanding. And you don't always have 30 minutes to give the whole explanation. Sometimes it's, can I do it? No, that's not best for you to do. And that should be enough. And as a authority figure, we know if they think they're being treated unfairly, sometimes we have to work on creating things to help them to develop humility. And that doesn't mean degrading them, but working around from different avenues toward acceptance. And that's what we'll get into in the second and third chapter with dealing with building humility. So continuing on here with page 17, going back to page 17 and looking at the third point that we've covered, this is one of the most, if not the most important point the peaceful solution could offer. You'll find it as the very first positive character trait in every list of character traits we give, and that's being educated. And it says, I have an obligation and a responsibility to myself to pursue a sound education and to be knowledgeable about the world around me. Now, if you turn over to page 11, and as a lot of the teachers talked about with addictions and drugs and so forth, it doesn't mean that to get the knowledge you need to go get the experience. It doesn't mean that. You can take your whole life away by, well, I just need to get the experience. Okay, well, now you're in jail for 30 years. Did you get the experience? Because you just missed your whole life. And I've recently had the opportunity to speak with a young man who is, it kind of related to me because he's a year older than myself. He's 49 years old, and he went to prison when he was 17, and he just got out a few months ago. And I'm thinking, wow, when I was 16, he went into prison, and he just got out, and I'm 48. My whole life has kind of been experienced as an adult, and he was in prison this whole time. And he's missed all of that life that he could have had. Well, and it was because of one bad decision that he made that cost him 30 years of his life. And I've asked him before, well, if you had it to do all over again, would you change? Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'd make a different choice. But it's easier said than done. A lot easier said than done. We all know what we should do in some aspects, but doing it's another thing. But here on page 11, once again, knowledge is power. And you're going to find this on page 11 of the acceptance unit and the responsibility unit. You're going to find page 11 is knowledge is power. And think about this. When you think of powerful nations, it's because of technology, right? That's what they think. Technology, economies, strong economies, large economies. You don't think of power as in an enormous amount of people, or India would be considered an extremely powerful nation. India is a nuclear nation, but they're not considered a superpower. United States, China with their economy and their technology. Japan has a very technologically advanced society. And we think about knowledge being the power of technology. But when you take out the knowledge of morality, think about how, as a person, you can weaken a person who doesn't have moral character or the knowledge of how to develop a moral character. When you take that away from a person, you weaken that person. When you take that away from a community, the education of moral character, you weaken the community. You take it away from a nation, you weaken the nations. So when you have a nation or a weakening of the nations or of a community or of a person, a household, you have a lack of positive moral character that's being taught or shown how to be developed. And it's very important when you hear, if you ever hear the saying of weakening a community, weakening an economy, weakening a nation, always think first there's moral character that's missing. That's what's missing. That's what's causing it to be weakened. And if you'll take time to look at it and examine it, you'll see that's the lack of ingredient that is needed to strengthen it. You can have all the money. Think of the United States, the greatest economy in the world and the greatest debt in the world. We're the richest poor people you'll ever meet as a nation. And that's just a fact. Not for sure it's smart. In fact, I wouldn't want to be in that situation myself, but that's the way the world looks at it. But back here to page 11. Taking your education seriously is another way you can demonstrate that you are a unique individual with moral potential. If you want to fulfill your potential, we all have to get educated. And this education continues. It never stops. I've been in the same business that I do for a living. I've been doing it since I was 16. So I've been doing it for 32 years. And I still learn new things all of the time. And I feel like I've done it so much I could do it in my sleep, but there's always new things that I learn. And with teaching the peaceful solution, that is one thing that I've enjoyed with meeting people from many different countries, is every time you think that, that's a simple thing. Not in every country. You learn to respect the differences between countries. When you can go from one country and my US dollar is worth $1 US here. And I can go to Nigeria and my $1 US makes 535 naira. So when they have to pay $3 for a loaf of bread, they're literally paying almost $1,700 of their own money. That's enormous. That's an enormous difference, especially when, when we went to Argentina and we seen a bicycle that was, I think it was $999,000 or something like that. My mind has never been able to comprehend there's a differentiation between the Argentine peso and the American dollar. All I seen was all these long numbers. And I think, how do people live in this? How can you go in and look at a bag of potato chips that are $70? And my mind has never comprehended that. But this education that I'm talking about and this pursuing of a positive moral way to improve yourself doesn't necessarily mean make your money more valuable or reduce cost. It means learn how to manage and develop yourself in the environment that you're in, that you can be beneficial. Because it is possible to be successful, and that success is not measured in wealth. It's measured in moral potential. That is, any environment can be done that way in any country at this time. Even though it can be extremely difficult, morality can be achieved. It just takes effort. Once again here, it says getting a sound education is one way in which you can do this. In addition to your basic subjects of English, social studies, and mathematics, and science, a sound moral education will assist you in being aware of what is going on in your community, nation, and world. Well-informed people are knowledgeable about the world around them. They pay attention to influences, and that's what it means to be knowledgeable, is to understand what is positive and what is negative. It doesn't mean that you need to partake of it. It just means that you understand the effects of it. They gather all the facts, then test and prove what is correct before making a decision. And once again, as I think William and also David expressed, that doesn't mean that, they say drugs are bad. Well, let me try. It doesn't mean you have to try them to know they're bad. You don't have to experience them to know the effects of them. You know, and I know I've had teens. I've never tried a drug in my life, so no, they haven't. And I know many people that have never tried drugs in their life, so no, not everybody has. And a lot of that has to do with when you were born, the years that you experienced school, and the trend that was going through society. If you were born in the 60s or 70s, it was a very different thing than in the 80s and 90s. Very different. Even the way they were perceived and looked at were different. The scare that came through in the 80s, where people were using needles, you also had the AIDS epidemic that came through. And when we were in school, in the middle school, we heard of AIDS and we were scared to death of anything to do with something like that. We thought all of those things would cause AIDS. Now we know that they can, and a lot of other things cause AIDS too, but there was a lot of fear that kept us from doing things because we thought we were going to experience much more than that. And then I had friends that, well, they couldn't get enough of it. They were like a walking pharmacy. But these were things that you had to choose to do, but there was a lot of influence in where you were born, your friends you had, location. A lot of that can have a difference on how much you've experienced or not experienced it. So here at the bottom of the page, it says, ironically, many teens report that youths who are smart are picked on. They're often called nerds and geeks. Hey, as hurtful as those names might be, what is even worse is neglecting your education. Be smart, studious, and aware of what is going on around you. People who are informed and determined to maintain a positive moral character will not jeopardize their safety, health, or future. So even though people might pick on you for doing such a thing, educating yourself, move forward with it. Don't let anyone deter you from improving your education on what is right. Now, the last two here go together, but we're going to do them separately, but they're pretty much on the same page, here on page 17. And it says, empathy and consideration are two very important character traits that will enable me to treat others the way I would want to be treated. And looking over to page 13, and this is the last page that Catan covered, it was talked about accepting others, and it said, can you imagine being tested about something that you feel very sensitive about? Something that is beyond your control at this time in your life. Can you imagine what a typical day of school would be like if you felt that you were not accepted by your peers? There's a lot of people that go through that, and there's a lot of people that are not able to process that. And these are situations that are created that should not be created. Whether someone comes in and they have the nicest of clothes or their clothes are very used and worn, that should not determine what a person is like. When I was in school, my clothes were very used and worn. I was not born in a rich family, and I didn't get a lot of new stuff. And I reused my brother's clothes most of the time. That was the things we had to do. My grandmother made a lot of my shirts. They were homemade. They didn't come from a store. And I didn't know any different. I thought everybody lived that way. So I didn't really have a problem, but I remember the first time someone said something to me about not having the name brand shoes. I remember working really, really, really hard till I got a name brand shoe because I never even noticed I didn't have it until somebody said it. And then I remembered working extremely hard, raking leaves and mowing grass so I could go get me a pair of Air Jordans. And I had to wait till they went on sale too because I would have never got to the price that they were at. But I remember the difference it made when I thought, wow, I am the only one that doesn't have this. And then I wanted it. But it really didn't change who I was as a person. It didn't make me a better person to get them. I just felt like I fit in more, which it didn't make me fit in more either. They fell apart just like my other shoes did. So here it says, for many young adults, this is reality. They must deal with a lack of acceptance on a daily basis. Every day, teens just like you, or adults, you don't have to be a teen, are teased, humiliated, because others have not learned the moral principle of treating others with care and concern. And once we get into the consideration, we'll be working on respect. But we're building up for this self-control and respect. Accepting others means deciding to treat them the way you would like to be treated. You know, a lot of people call that the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them to do unto you. But this is something that if society would develop this, we can make a change very quickly. It means putting yourself in their shoes and asking yourself, how would I feel if someone treated me this way or made fun of me? The ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes is called empathy. Having empathy is an important part of accepting and having consideration for others. But, also remembering that the most common people you find in school that bully others were once bullied themselves. And that's a very common statistic, that most people that bully were once bullied themselves. If you're going into middle school, and some of the schools we went to, the middle schools were 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, well, the 6th graders were bullied, but by the time they were in the 8th grade, they were bullying the 6th graders. They were just returning the deed, so to speak. Which didn't help anything. It's just a continual dog chasing its tail, no breakage in the negativity. It's just continuing to pour out spew the poison, so to speak. But it didn't help anything. To bring forth acceptance, you have to break the cycle of this humiliating, the picking, the bullying, the downgrading of another individual. And that's what, of course, looking here to the very last one on page 17, which talks about accepting others, does not mean agreeing with their negative or immoral behaviors. Rather, it is willingness to interact with respect, empathy, and consideration. And that word respect doesn't mean a lot yet to someone who's just studying the peaceful solution. They might think they know what respect is, but there's a lot more to that word respect that they will learn as we proceed through there. But care and consideration is a great foundational part to have in their minds when we're speaking about this. And we'll go ahead and read that last paragraph here on page 13. And it says, once again, accepting others means understanding that they too have circumstances that are beyond their control. That goes more or less with the bullet point before, as well as positive traits and abilities. It means accepting them regardless of their nationality, where they're from, or ethnicity. That's their culture and religion. Now, here's the one we're talking about where acceptance means you don't accept everything. And a lot of people you hear in society today, and there's so many classifications of people today that didn't exist just 10 years ago, and everybody feels, well, you just have to accept me for what I am. Well, we do accept, society has to accept everyone has a right to make a choice. That doesn't mean that society should accept as a leading role if someone is telling you to do something that brings harm to yourself, someone else, or the environment. It means they have the right to do what they would like to do, but that doesn't mean as a society we should accept that and adopt that in if it's bringing harm. So here it says accepting others does not mean condoning actions and attitudes that are negative, disrespectful, or immoral. Nor does it mean agreeing with someone who is wrong, even if he is your friend. Accepting others simply means treating them with the same respect, empathy, and consideration that you would want to be treated with. And once again, you see over to the side there in the black box, it says consideration means to be thoughtful of others, and empathy means to understand how others feel. And with that in mind, of course, turning back over to page 17, we've got one last thing we want to read. And here you have a student, he looks like he's doing his homework there, and he's kind of in a thought, kind of daydreaming, so to speak. And it says, treat others in the same way you would like to be treated. By doing so, you might discover a best friend you didn't know you had. And, as society, we have to learn that bringing this in, President Obama said this one time, that peace, and he was speaking of peace treaties in the Middle East, he said peace is more than just documentations that are signed, peace is hard work. And when you go into other countries, and I had an experience here recently where I went into a country and I seen a man who, from his waist down, he was pretty much missing. And he was on like a little homemade dolly, and he was just pulling himself along, and he was right at the border hoping to get money from everybody that crossed over. And I seen people give him money, and I thought, wow, that doesn't really change anything in his life just to give him money, because obviously he was homeless. And I thought one of these days I would really like to stop and speak with that gentleman about the peaceful solution. Because even though I'm sure there's a large part missing, there's a whole lot he can do. He can be a great teacher if he educates himself, and he can really be a benefit to society. Even though right now you can tell he feels he has no purpose, so he's just looking for free money. Those are people that you look at and you think, that doesn't change anything to do with him teaching. He could learn and offer morality to anybody. Just because from waist down he is literally gone doesn't change the fact that he's a human being and he still has an enormous amount of education and potential that he can offer to society. So keep those things in mind, because what I say is, as we talk about, we'll get to it, giving a man a fish doesn't help him. teaching a man how to fish is what truly helps him. And we'll get to all of those things later on. Our next class is going to be on 7/14 at 5:30. That'll be this Wednesday. So once again, we look forward to joining you, and we'll begin chapter 2. Thank you very much.